All right. The House Committee on Economic Development and Small Business will come to order. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chair Hoskins.
Here.
Representatives Grant.
Here.
Whitsett.
Here.
Neely. Liberati.
Here.
Kofia.
Here.
Farhat.
Here.
Miller. Tisdale.
Here.
Van Workum.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Roth.
Here.
St. Germain.
Here.
Mr. Chair, quorum of the committee is present.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. All right, and thank you all for being here. All right, first thing on the agenda, we are going to be taking up House Bills 5895 through 5897, a package that I've been working on with Representative Pohutsky, dealing with price gouging. With that, the committee will go at ease.
All right, the committee will come to order and we will begin testimony. Chair Hoskins.
Thank you, Vice Chair Grant. So today, Representative Pohutsky and I are going to be going over this package of bills dealing with price gouging during emergencies. And I want to take you all back to when this bill package was originally conceived in March of 2017. Then we had a major windstorm here in Michigan, which actually kind of created almost hurricane-force winds here in the state and left over 1 million people without power. In my town, my hometown of Southfield, there was a motel that typically would have flashing neon lights of $59.99 to stay at the hotel, but that during that windstorm, they turned off that sign, and we found out, we were getting calls to our office that this particular motel was charging people $400 a night. When I was a staffer here in the legislature, I started looking to what we can do to help kind of alleviate this. I reached out to the Attorney General at the time, Attorney General Schuette, and we looked into using the current price gouging statute, but we realized at the time that the statute didn't have enough teeth. And so I started looking into what other states do in this situation. Enter this legislation. Over 34 states in the District of Columbia do some kind of price gouge, have some kind of statute dealing with price gouging during emergencies, particularly dealing with lodging or essential goods or energy products. And so from there on, I started pulling from each of those states. And this is something that is certainly not a red state thing or a blue state thing. I pulled from, for this particular statute, I pulled from Arkansas and California. But all over the country, this is used. We certainly have been seeing it throughout this year, in Florida in particular, during the 2 hurricanes that hit there. They aggressively use their price gouging statute there to be able to go after bad actors who try to take advantage of people during their worst times. And, you know, I actually want to stop right here and just kind of make sure I'm saying that most businesses, most retailers, most hotelers, most people who are who sell energy products, who deal with energy products, are good actors. They want to be good actors. They want to do the right thing. But this particular legislation is simply targeting those who want to take advantage of take advantage of people, profiteer off their pain, and be able to. We want to make sure that we are doing everything to stop them here in Michigan. We've certainly seen it in a number of situations here in our states, particularly during COVID-19. I'm sure many of you remember $25 bottles of water and $60 tissue, people getting taken advantage of when they were trying to get PPE for themselves. And as we were going through working with Attorney General Nessel on this, we wanted to make sure that we were continuing to tighten up this legislation, making sure that it was better every time we introduced it. And so I think we've really gotten to a place here with this legislation that I think is something that will protect people. This is only used during declared emergencies by the governor. We haven't had that many, actually. In 2023, for example, we had 6. This year, we've only had 1 in May. Coincidentally, another severe storm that created a lot of wind. But again, this is to make sure that people are not taken advantage of as they are trying to get those essential goods and products that they need. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Representative Pahutsky.
Thank you, Chair Hoskins. Thank you all for hearing testimony on this bill package. Rep. Hoskins really summed up the need for it. My bill specifically prohibits excessive pricing for specified energy products and services during a state of emergency. So the entire bill package is just meant to give Michiganders the tools we need to deal with price gouging in a more effective manner. Rep. Hoskins touched on how we saw this become a real problem during the pandemic. I know many of us who were serving at that time volunteered with the Attorney General's price gouging hotline. We heard a lot about products that were being excessively priced just to try and make a unfair profit during an already tumultuous time. This package would help crack down on bad actors and give Michiganders one less thing to worry about when the unfortunate worst case happens. The only flag that I do want to make is that we have a substitute for my bill, HB 5897, before us, and that just simply expands the exemption in Section 2, subsection A, to co-ops and municipal-owned utilities. It would make sense that they are exempted. They're not profit-making entities. So we're happy to take any questions.
Yep, and I'll also add too, for my bills as well, dealing with essential products and lodging, we also will have a substitute there. We heard a lot from those industries about some of the changes that they make, so we tried to incorporate them into a substitute as well.
Okay, we do have one question, Representative Van Werkum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you guys have any statistics on how many cases have actually gone completely through and said that there was price gouging? And what is the cost to a business to undergo dealing with the Attorney General to fight back or appeal the process of being a price gouger?
Rep. Hoskins, correct me if I'm wrong. The main issue with trying to get statistics is you can't really gather statistics on things that aren't happening. So the issue that we're trying to address here is when there are isolated incidents of price gouging. Currently, the Attorney General's office is fairly well equipped to deal with more systemic matters. So if you have multiple locations, engaging in price gouging, but if you have one store here, one gas station here, it becomes much more difficult. So it's not a super satisfying answer, but it's hard to gather statistics on things that are not currently able to be prosecuted or investigated or anything like that. In terms of the cost, I know that we're going to hear from some of our partners in retail and other spaces, but I will say, and you're the attorney here, so by all means, weigh in, being able to demonstrate not engaging in price gouging behavior is fairly straightforward. It's just explaining why the price went up. So obviously, if it's escalated beyond that, if there is truly a bad actor, the cost, I would assume, would go up because then you're talking about bringing in legal counsel and things like that. But demonstrating why you had to increase costs, be it a material increase or something like that, is fairly straightforward because all of that is documented. You have documentation showing that transport cost went up or materials went up, something like that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we want to clarify with our substitutes as well, is making sure that when you are, it's easy, when you're doing the Attorney General's office is doing an investigation, we want to make sure that it's easy for anyone to be able to simply say, hey, this is why the price went up or price went down. We also put kind of a range in there to make sure that no one is, as they were being investigated, no one is feeling like they have to go through an onerous process of being able to simply prove or justify why a price went up on something, or price went up on a product or a service or something like that. We also put some things into our sub to make sure that there was some language in the sub dealing with making sure how the attorney general did their investigations. There was concern about as you're doing the investigation, there might be some issues with that information getting out, and that might like slander a business, for example. So we want to change that to make sure, as they're going through the process, it's kept confidential. Really, this is not, again, most people are in a position, most businesses are doing the right thing. And even if there's some kind of mistake, we want to make sure that a business is not being targeted or punished simply because they raised the price, because the market rose, because the market said they had to raise the price. There are things in place in the legislation to make sure there's justifications for why you had to raise your price.
We have a question from Representative Roth.
With the substitutes and everything, guys, what was the percentage that you ended up saying? If it was over 10%, 20%, 30%, what's the substitute language?
It's
Did
still-
that change it?
It's still 10%.
Okay.
And we have one more follow-up from Van Werkel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought it was interesting that you said it's difficult to assess this because it's not happening. Now, we have instances, certainly, and be curious to know what you believe should have been the cost of that hotel room that you used, but also the point of how much it will require them to hire lawyers and such to defend themselves after the Attorney General. You said there hasn't been targeting, but as I recall, during the COVID crisis, this administration did a lot of targeting of businesses and posted their names in papers constantly. Every week they did that. So I think it's concerning that this gives another tool for that, but also the cost associated to hire lawyers to defend yourselves could very well put a lot of these businesses out of business.
So you must have misheard me. I didn't say it wasn't happening. I said that the investigations aren't happening because legally they can't. And if there were any concerns about how these investigations happened under emergency orders, which are no longer in effect, then that's actually all the more reason for us to pass these bills, because they do provide a more a tighter framework for how those have to operate. There was no requirement for confidentiality during the COVID-19 emergency. That's why, based on feedback from businesses and other involved stakeholders, that confidentiality requirement is going in there. So I wanted to clear up what you misunderstood, but also explain that if there were issues with how that happened, these bills are actually the solution.
All right, thank you. The committee will go at ease.
Okay. Committee will come back to order. Let's see. We have one person here wishing to speak and opposing the bills. Mr. Donovan Gomez. All right, Mr. Gomez, and for everyone testifying today, we are going to be testifying 3 minutes. As you're getting closer to the time, Haley will hold up signs just to let you know, like 1 minute, 30 seconds, etc. But whenever you're ready, floor is yours. Hit that red button. There you go.
Testing. Okay. I'm going to oppose Bill 895. My knowledge on this is extremely limited because I just literally walked in the door. But I am familiar with Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, and basically it explains how you can take a block of iron and then you can make pans, pin needles, you can do all of that. If these businesses that are in these rural counties are experiencing economic hardship, then of course, naturally, they're going to have to increase their price. And in essence, I believe that these people who go into these businesses, the customers, they have the right to just not go to their business, refuse it. So also too, in Bill 895, the preponderance of evidence is extremely broad instead of being tried beyond a reasonable doubt of a jury of your peers, which is exactly what's wrong with this bill right here, because a preponderance of evidence basically states that a judge can basically be the sole determination of who is of who's liable or at fault, which would definitely leave room for a lot of targeting. State of emergency means natural or man-made. Very powerful words right there. So when it comes to that, yeah, so basically I would definitely have you guys read up on Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. And let's see, I don't know if my 3 minutes is up yet. What else do we got? Prescribe a reasonable time at which an individual shall appear and testify with, this is, like $10,000. That's a lot of money. I'm just gonna say it like that. Okay, I'm done.
All right, well, thank you so much for your testimony. All right, I'm going to read in some cards. Let's see. Not wishing to speak. Opposing the bills, Tim Langhose from NFIB. Not wishing to speak in support of the bills, the Michigan Electric Cooperative Association. Not wishing to speak and opposing the bills, Matt Sowash, representing the Michigan Association of Convention and Visitors Bureau. Not wishing to speak in opposition of the bill, Jacob Manning, representing the Small Business Association of Michigan. Not wishing to speak, opposing the bill, Leah Robinson from the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. Not wishing to speak, opposing the bills as written, John McNamara, representing the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association. Not wishing to speak in support of the bill, the Michigan Attorney General. Ashley Steffen wrote that in on behalf of the Michigan Attorney General. Not wishing to speak in support of the bills, Katie Abrams from the Michigan Municipal Electric Association. Not wishing to speak opposing the bills, the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. Not wishing to speak neutral on the bills, Harrisana Richards, representing the Michigan Municipal League. Not wishing to speak opposing the bills, the Grand Rapids Chamber. And not wishing to speak opposing the bills, the Detroit Regional Chamber. All right. Next order of business. We are going to hear testimony on House Bills 1695 through 1698, sponsored by Representative Grant and Representative Neely. All right, whenever you're ready, Representative Grant.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Hoskins and committee members, for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 6095 through 6098. Together, they begin the work that will help to address the housing crisis that Michigan is experiencing. We have been discussing housing for a long time, and I think it's the one issue that no matter what colleague I speak to, no matter what district they're in, at some level, their constituents are experiencing issues with housing. Over the last 2 years, I've been able to have many conversations, do a lot of research, ask for a lot of data, and I started basing that research around 3 questions. Those questions were, why is it taking so long to provide the housing that Michiganders need? What is increasing the cost of housing unnecessarily? And what changes can we make at the state level to address these things? The answer consistently, when I talk to experts, when I talk to people in and out of the state, Republican, Democrat, was consistently by addressing local zoning law. First, I want to share a little bit of background on the history of zoning ordinances. I'm a little bit of a policy nerd, so I don't want to assume that we're all on the same page here about where zoning ordinances begin. They did not become a widespread trend in America until about the 1950s. So it's been roughly about 70 years when local zoning ordinances have really gone across the country and people have, personalized them and created this patchwork that we see from county to county, state to state. The intent has evolved over time, but it was always meant to shape our communities as they grew. So suburbs were just starting, highways were being put in place, and so these ordinances were supposed to help that. But there has been a lot of unintended negative consequences that have hurt housing affordability and supply along the way. One of the main things that we see as a result of these ordinances is a resistance to density. This leads to an overemphasis on single-family housing, and that does not meet the need of everyone in all of our districts. The second consequence is an increased housing cost. Current zoning laws can make it easier to build high-end housing, but it makes it very hard to build more affordable housing. And I'd like to give the caveat, when we talk about affordable, a lot of people have in mind the lowest end of housing. But because of the level of housing crisis that we're seeing, affordable can be seen as a single-family home that's under $400,000 or $2,000 a month for rent. So when we think about affordable, there are a lot of people who are working every day, they're working full-time, 1 or 2 jobs, and still can't get into what is quote-unquote affordable housing. And the third thing there are many things, but out of these 3 that I'm talking about today, the third thing is because these ordinances are such a patchwork, they're all over the place, communities don't have adequate long-term planning. So everything is a little bit fragmented, meaning that infrastructure, transportation, and other needs don't necessarily align with the needs of the people who live there anymore. I'm sharing this to show that we haven't always done things this way. And so I know that many people have an allegiance to a lot of the zoning ordinances that are in place and the local power that these ordinances uphold. But honestly, they were an experiment that has been in place and have negatively affected the people that they were supposed to serve. I'm not saying do away with zoning, but I am saying there may be a chance to do a little reform. Try some different parameters with the zoning that will better serve the people who are here now. I would also like to note that the 1960s were probably the last time that housing was truly affordable as well, if we want to think about the onset of these ordinances and the effect they've had. So today, I have 4 bills that are before you, and Representative Neely is also on this package. First, I'd like to address House Bill 6097. It would allow duplexes by right in single-family residential zones. This would apply to metro areas with a population of 50,000 or more. And to be quite honest, I know many people are like, there's so few spaces where this will qualify. Usually an infill lot or a corner lot somewhere, they say, what is the use of this? But I wanted to give an example to provide some scope. In Kent County, where I'm from, 98% of the land is zoned for single-family residences. That means the leftover 2% is all that we have available for multi-unit housing. Many people cannot afford a single-family home, maybe not at this time of their life. So if they were able to have another option so that they could step into single-family homes, it would create really the cycle of housing that we should see instead of keeping them out or keeping them a forever renter, as many Americans and Michiganders are looking at right now. The second bill, House Bill 6095, would limit the number of parking spots that could be required per unit. So here we are talking about multifamily housing, apartment complexes. It would say per unit, the maximum that you can require is 1.5 parking spots. And I want to point out that 1.5 is actually still pretty high. I put that number in to be a good partner with some of our local government partners who requested it, but actually the standard is becoming much lower around the country for people who truly want to address the housing issue. The preface is that we should not put parking ahead of someone having a roof over their head. In House Bill 6098, amends rules around protest petitions. What we see when a new development is being proposed is that oftentimes people from all sides of the city, sometimes outside of a city, or even another side of the state show up to give their comment on this development. And many times we see that it means a development or more housing does not happen. Usually the people who are giving these comments, they have housing. They have a place to live and a place to be. And so it's very much a comment of, we know people need housing, but just not here, not in my backyard. And so what this bill would do is say that comments should be had, people should be able to engage, but it should be the people who are directly affected by the new project, by the new development. It also expands some of the language. Current language right now would limit things to landowners. Landowners, like when it's able to decide if the project will happen or not, landowners are able to weigh in. And this expands language to also tenants, renters, other people who live directly around the project should be able to weigh in. But weighing in doesn't just mean submitting a card, no, this shouldn't happen, but why? How will this harm the community so that we can get to housing? If it's not this type of housing that's proposed, what is it? Because what has been happening is that the answer has just been no to housing, and it's leaving us in the situation where we are behind more than 200,000 units in Michigan. Lastly, House Bill 6096 would revise study requirements for new developments. Essentially, what it would say is that if you are interested in doing a development, when you're working with a local municipality, they should be able to review your proposal and tell you, based on what we have in front of us, these are the studies that would be required for you to move forward. This allows that person to get a clearer idea of how much the project will cost. It also allows them to say from the onset if they're able to do it or not. What we have seen in many places around Michigan is that studies are added on repeatedly. Oh, come back after you do this. Oh, it's been 6 months since that one. It's been a year since that one. Go back, do it again. And this not only drastically increases the timeline of housing, but it increases the cost that is passed on to the renter. What this bill is asking is that the local municipality become a partner and work up front to determine what is needed to confirm the safety and the viability of this project. If the scope of the project changes, they can request more studies, but only if the scope changes. These bills are the beginning of work. This is by no means everything that should happen, but it is a good start. It's not something that will wake up overnight and see million more housing units, but it's something that sets us on the path. I am not the first person who has thought of these ideas. These conversations have been going on for a long time on both sides of the aisle. But there are a couple of things I want to emphasize. These bills are not about big developers. They are about making housing more accessible, more affordable for people at all price points. I'd also like to share that for the past year and a half, I have worked with everyone willing to have conversations and bring ideas to the table. This includes stakeholders, this includes colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Some people have decided to show up for those conversations and some have not, but there are so many people who actually are willing and very interested in addressing the root cause of why we see the housing crisis. Since 2019, work groups have been continuously meeting to talk about housing solutions. And I'm just gonna be really frank. There has been one group who has continuously opposed everything that these work groups bring forward when it comes to these types of changes. We can give dollars, that's wonderful, but it's not enough. We can do smaller fixes, but if we want to get to the root of the housing crisis, we have to really address what we are fundamentally doing that's creating this. And so I know that more work groups will be needed in the future. We'll need to continue working on this, but the answer is not to do nothing and keep meeting. The answer is to do what we know is needed and to choose the people that we serve over local power. And that to me, the local power decision versus a roof over constituents' head is an easy one to make. We should all be working together on this conversation. The final thing that I will say is the conversation around what will these changes do? Will it bring people into our communities who maybe haven't been here before? Will it change how our communities look? In all of the conversations that I've had, I haven't really had people who are saying, I haven't been able to move into this one community that I wanted to go to because housing costs too much. What I've heard more of is young adults or college students saying, I wanted to go back home, but I'll either have to live in my parents' basement or go somewhere else. I've heard senior citizens say, I want to stay in the community that I've contributed to for decades. I raised my family here. I retired here. But I don't need this 2,000 square foot home anymore. I need to downsize to some senior housing, but I can't afford it. So this isn't about those people coming into our communities. It's about keeping the people who are our family members. They are our neighbors, and they want to stay. They want to be a part of these communities. And so those are the people that we need to think about when we're really talking about housing and how we can be effective. So thank you so much for your time today. We do have testimony from many experts and partners who are doing this work all across the state. And so I know zoning is so very exciting, but thank you for taking the time to listen. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you, Representative Grant. We have one question if you are for it. Representative Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. One question, I need clarification on the municipality size of 50,000 people. Are we talking a city, a municipality? Are we talking a county? What exactly are we talking about with the 50,000?
Currently in the legislation, it references statistical areas, and there is a map that outlines what these areas are and places adjacent to them. There is conversation of having a flat population mark there instead, which I'm open to.
I may give you just a scenario, and you tell me if I'm accurate or not. So Grand Traverse County's 100,000 people. Would that mean the outside townships around Grand Traverse County would be affected in that?
I'm pulling up the map to make sure that I do not misspeak. So it does look like there would be an area around there that would qualify as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Representative Grant. Next, we are going to have Andrea Brown and Brian Connolly from the Michigan Association of Planners. They are joining us virtually.
Good morning. You can hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, very good. Good morning, Chair Hoskins and committee members. Thank you for hearing my testimony this morning. I'm Andrea Brown, the Executive Director of the Michigan Association of Planning. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization that represents 4,000 members, 1,000 professional planners, and about 4,000 elected and appointed officials like city council, township boards. Our members are the municipal planners and local officials who struggle to find solutions to local housing development challenges. These 4 bills outlined just now by Representative Grant will go a long way to help planners and officials advance important reforms to housing supply. Community planners across the state are already making local regulatory changes to increase housing supply, but bills like this will add more tools to the toolbox, and that is a critical need right now. A community master plan is required by the Planning Enabling Act. Recently, Representative Grant advanced an amendment to the act to include a housing element that was signed by the governor in November. That amendment articulated that communities should be looking more closely at planning and zoning to increase housing supply. MISHDA also recognizes the critical need and developed a program to provide funding for planning and zoning for housing through their Housing Ready Incentive Grant Program. State legislative and state agency actions are both necessary in addition to local efforts to increase housing supply in Michigan. In municipalities across the state, planners are scrutinizing the data to determine what the local housing needs are. How are demographics changing? Do we have enough housing of the right kind to keep our seniors in place, to help young families, to accommodate all income levels, and to attract new talent? This is what planners do: analyze the data and make sound recommendations about future land use. Planners need tools like the housing element in addition to the master plan, and like these 4 housing bills that cut the cost and open the door for new housing development. That's what House Bill 6095 does, cuts the cost by reducing residential parking requirements. Parking requirements can add up to $20,000 to the cost per unit in a housing development. Reducing the number of required spaces goes a long way to reduce the cost of housing development. MAP supports this bill. In fact, we would support 0 parking requirements. We also support House Bill 6096, which prohibits requirements for repeat development review studies. We support measures that increase certainty for development and which streamline the development review process. However, a hallmark of good planning is ensuring that municipal leaders, planners, and the public can review and evaluate relevant information concerning a proposal and its impact. We believe that this bill will streamline development review processes while ensuring that local units of government and the public still have access to important information. Streamlining the development review process does cut the costs of developers. House Bill 6907 would allow duplexes in single-family zones, and we support this bill. A duplex in a single-family zone would have little to no impact on existing residents, can be designed to be indistinguishable from a single-family home, and is an easy way to incrementally increase the number of housing units in a neighborhood. A municipality maintains the authority to plan for these units and to determine where they can be appropriately located. And finally, protest petitions. Many excellent housing developments, small and large, are stymied by citizen or resident opposition. There are many opportunities for citizens to express their opinions on development without using the protest petition. We support House Bill 6098, which revises protest petition requirements. Michigan municipalities are eager for solutions to help them solve local housing challenges, to plan and zone for an appropriate local housing stock that meets the needs of all residents. These 4 bills won't solve every problem, but they're a great first step and will align Michigan with other states that are leading similar statutory reforms. Planners and local officials will benefit greatly by having the statutory authority allowed by these bills. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Brown? All right, it looks like there were no questions. Thank you so much for your testimony this morning. All right, next we are going to have in person Dawn Crandall from the Michigan Home Builders Association. All right, whenever you're ready, 3 minutes.
3 minutes, I got it. Thank you, Chair Hoskins and members of the committee. I am Dawn Crandall. I am the EVP of Government Relations for the Home Builders Association of Michigan. We are a statewide professional trade association comprised of 18 local home builders associations around the state, and we represent roughly 5,000 builders, remodelers, subcontractors, and supplier members. As the largest association representing home building industry, we work daily to promote the building industry by positively impacting the legislative, regulatory, and legal arenas affecting housing attainability. I am here today to applaud the sponsors of House Bill 6095, 6096, 6097, and 6098 for introducing these bills and recognizing the need to address the housing shortage in our state. We recently celebrated our 75th anniversary, and after spending time with builders from across the state, I can tell you the topics of conversation ranged from the lack of lot availability and the barriers and regulations that stand in the way of building homes at all price points. And let me just say, a lot of those barriers do not increase the safety of a home that is being built, but it does increase time and it does increase price. Let me be clear, Michigan has a supply problem. Low inventory coupled with high demand creates higher pricing. The housing industry has seen some rough years. Our last big build in the state was in 2005, do the math in your head, when just under 55,000 single-family permits were pulled in this state. In 2007, we saw that number drop to 15,000, and by 2009, the single-family permits dropped to under 7,000. We have not had a major build since then, and this year we are projecting just under 14,000 single-family permits to be pulled. The good news is the year-to-date numbers for October this year show that 13,180 single-family permits have been pulled, and in October alone there were over 1,500. With 2 months left in the year, we expect to exceed our prediction, which would be the first time. Here in Michigan, thanks to bipartisan legislation signed into law last session and this session, we are seeing the impact those laws are having in communities that are implementing those tools around the state with new homes for our workforce being built. The HBA of Michigan will continue to work with the administration, the legislature, and our housing partners to implement policy which will allow for our members to build attainable homes needed around the state. I've said it before and I'll say it again, housing is economic development. As Michigan continues to recruit and grow our economic base, grow our population, it is clear that housing needs to be part of that conversation. It's also important to point out that housing is an economic benefit to communities, schools, and the state. From fees paid to communities, jobs created, property taxes paid, money spent on retail, the sales tax paid on every piece of material that goes into the home, and the revenue that goes to schools when children move into the schools, the building of homes contributes financially to the locals, the schools, and the tax base. On behalf of our members, I urge you to vote yes on House Bill 6095, 6096, 6097, and 6098. By removing or limiting barriers and regulations standing in the way of creating safe and attainable housing, it will allow us to build homes, enrich communities, and change lives. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Representative Farhat has a question for you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be really quick. You mentioned 2005, there was 50,000 single-family permits pulled. Obviously, we understand there's a number of factors that go into those. Would you say there was also an increase of zoning that kind of correlated to the reduction in permits? Would you say the two are kind of, maybe not necessarily correlated, but there is a increase in zoning, decrease in permits being pulled in a certain area?
I don't have specific statistics to that. I think if you look back at that time frame, we saw a lot of people, I always say when kind of Katrina hit down south, that was our Katrina up here. A lot of schools discontinued their career tech programs, and a lot of our members actually left to go to states that were still building. When I started, we had almost 14,000 members and about 36 local associations. So I can't say that there's a direct correlation. What I can tell you, though, based on a national number, and I know a lot of people on this committee and in the housing subcommittee like to throw this number out. Regulatory costs to the price of a home nationally is about $94,000. And if they break it down just by zoning approval, it's about $6,500. So there is a cost. As you have more zoning, it does increase the cost of housing.
All right, Representative Tisdale.
Thank you, Chair Hoskins. Very quickly, what, if anything, is getting in the way of communities under their current home rule authority of adopting these measures on their own?
There are some communities that are adopting similar issues, but I think when you look at especially the petition protest, we've had members who have had actually bills approved by locals and then had communities, not the local electeds, come in and by petition protest remove those homes from being built. I think some just need to know that we don't want to necessarily force communities to change their need, but at the same time, there are zoning things that do increase the cost of housing. And, in every community, we talk to our members and there's a need at all price points. So when you look at entry level, and as Representative Grant said, this is just the beginning of the conversation because seniors can't stay in their homes. I have a personal story of my parents. They want to downsize, but the homes aren't available.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for your testimony this morning. Next, we are going to be joined virtually by Kent Wood from Housing North.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. All right,
Thank
3
you.
minutes.
Good morning, and committee members. My name is Kent Wood. I'm very sorry I can't be down there in person with you today, but do appreciate the 21st century technology that's going to allow me to participate. I own Borealis Strategic and serve as the policy advisor for Housing North, and would like to thank you, all you committee members, for your work on housing over the past 2 to 4 years, especially. Housing North is a housing nonprofit that covers the 10-county region in Northwest Lower Michigan, basically Manistee up to the bridge. And Housing North's Housing Ready coordination staff has worked with dozens of communities, local units of government, developers, and financiers in all 10 of those counties, plus some, to help them become ready for housing development of all sizes and costs. And they can tell me every day from personal experience, one of the major hurdles they face is zoning and planning requirements. The package from Rep. Grant, Rep. Neely are a great start. Really, it helps remove certain arguments that have become stumbling blocks that hang up low and mid-scale housing, especially. Most small cities and communities in Northwest Michigan have publicly stated in one way or another that they want new housing stock. Most would rather not, especially you think of our many of the smaller villages and towns up in Northwest Lower Michigan. Most of them would prefer not to have larger structures or larger developments in place. So that requires easing restrictions on low to mid-scale housing options so that they're, which are very difficult to finance and construct in the current market. A number of these communities, I would say, dozens of these communities really have set about to make this happen and find out that their zoning or master plans quite simply won't allow for it, won't allow for smaller lot sizes, smaller unit sizes, etc. So they set out to make these changes and often get skewered publicly for it, and often with arguments that really don't have a basis in fact. So, we know now through decades of research and analysis on what zoning has accomplished or not accomplished, as Rep. Grant mentioned. We know that duplexes won't ruin communities or neighborhoods. We know that parking for less than 2 vehicles won't ruin communities or neighborhoods. It won't bring down property values. It won't do a whole host of consequences that are routinely brought up. These are small changes that that won't lead to widespread changes in a community in a short period of time. We know this. We've known this for a while. A lot of these arguments that we know communities hear when they're trying to amend their zoning shouldn't be fears in the 21st century. And we want to be focused on other impacts that zoning was truly meant for: heavy industry, infrastructure, public health, and safety, not whether we put one more unit on a lot or not. So we've seen it, unfortunately, time and time again, dozens of times in northern Michigan, especially over the past 2 years. It's not been good for our communities. It's not been an efficient use of time, quite honestly. So again, I'll just end by, we know from experience, from data, decades worth, that changes like these are beneficial to housing stock, not harmful. And Mr. Chair, I want to thank you for your time.
All right, thank you so much for your testimony. Any questions? All right, looks like there are no questions for you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll have Michigan Municipal League. I'm not sure who is going to be joining. Looks like Jen Richter Inc. You have Jen Richter Inc. is joined by Zach. Michelle. Oh, okay. Zach Michelle's. Thank you both for joining us today. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, committee members. Jen Rigtrink with the Michigan Municipal League. We are opposed to all of the bills as introduced. I've shared with policy staff questions and comments on each of those bills. Happy to go into those details if there's any questions. This is not just a local control issue for our members. I mean, housing is a huge issue in every community across the state. And it's a priority for our community. So we are dedicated and committed to finding real solutions for the housing crisis. The state, in the last 2 budgets, thank you all here for passing that, zoning reform work has been funded. Over $7 million in housing readiness grants have been funded, big and small, urban and rural communities, all across the state. But before that work can even be completed, those action reforms put in place, these bills would pull the carpet right out from under them before they can even put that reform in place. There's been a ton of work around zoning reforms. We worked on this with the Michigan Association of Planning that you heard from Andrea Brown earlier. The league followed that up with housing pattern books, where we have free source blueprints for duplexes, for fourplexes, to put into those spaces in neighborhoods that increases density without changing the character of the neighborhoods. Our members have been making these reforms by choice. And so we do question the need for a one-size-fits-all, because a one-size-fits-all usually fits no one. Even yesterday, the governor announced a housing project up in Petoskey that was awarded and funded affordable housing. It didn't take any zoning preemption up there to get that done, and there's been numerous housing projects across the state. We do have the issue of significant housing supply. These reforms, while may result in a small increase in housing supply, there's not any data to show that they actually affect affordability or increase affordable units being built. There's nothing in here that if savings do happen, either there's not savings happening, or if those savings are happening, there's nothing to require those savings be passed on to the actual buyer or renter. We did propose ideas at looking at a list of zoning reforms, letting communities pick and choose which ones actually make the most sense for their communities, and then giving credit to people who have actually already done this work versus, again, the one-size-fits-all swipe across the state. We've also suggested looking at, because this is the built environment, looking at solutions of office conversions. Let's look at places where we can put housing in already built environments versus having to wait for new construction. possibly looking at the Zoning Enabling Act and requiring municipalities to actually update that every 10 years, like we do master plans every 5 years. But I am going to pass it over to my colleague here, Zach, who is a member of our internal economic development and planning committee, where we took these draft bill ideas, we ran them through and worked with Representative Fink in the past session on these ideas. And to just give you some real world reality on the ground. We've had a lot of folks talking about these in concept, but they're not actual local government officials that are dealing with these regulations or developers or builders who are making these projects. I haven't had a developer ever tell me that a parking standard stopped them from doing a development. It's usually dictated by the bank's financing, as well as many of our members don't even have parking standards or have maximums. We did ask if there's data to show support for that. So we are interested, if there is, in seeing that data, that this is actually an issue in our state.
Hello, my name is Zach Michels. I'm an elected official at Dexter City, and I've been involved in planning and zoning in some capacity since 1999, from very rural communities in the Thumb to an entire county in Indiana. I've been the pointy part of the spear, and I'm going to share some of the experiences I've had. But first, thank you for talking about zoning on a Tuesday morning after a holiday weekend. I know it's the most exciting topic, and I would say I'm an ally, but with concerns about how this is written. So first, with the parking, City of Dexter has not required any parking spaces per unit in our downtown for years. We've had a 4-story building go on with 30 units that had 1 parking space per unit, and it was the most expensive units that were sold in town. We have another one next to the creek that's going in that has 1 parking space per unit, 2 for the penthouse folks, and units in there are going for $1.4 million. My concern from working in rural communities is if you have 2 adults who live in an apartment, you're going to have 2 cars. Where I grew up in Shepherd, there's no grocery store there now. Unless you work for the schools or the granary at the railroad track, you're going to have to drive to Mount Pleasant or Elma for a job or to buy the Cheerios. So it ought to have some better triggers where it comes on and comes off. Also, likewise, if you have a smaller complex, you're going to likely need more of those spaces, where if you have a larger 200 or 300 unit, you're going to have a lot more of the single folks in there that you're able to absorb some of that. With the application form, predictability is really important. Unfortunately, land entitlement is one of the trickiest, most complex things that man has created, and every site and every project is bespoke. So while sitting here, I just wrote a couple of potential studies that a project may need. Traffic generation study, utility capacity study, sound study, light flicker study, pollution incident prevention plan, flood plan, maybe a conditional letter of map revision, stormwater management plan studies, public services impact studies, natural resources, wetland impact study, navigation impact study, groundwater impact study, parking generation study. So my fear would be if we had to list all of those on an application form, maybe only 1 or 2 of those would be applicable to every project. But if we have to put the technical standards on there, our application is going to be thick. The traffic impact generation alone is incredible. So I fear that that would push out the smaller folks who are getting the middle housing and the little small stuff. They will just look at it, their eyes will cross, and they're going to say, I'm going to go to Indiana or Ohio. I'm not going to do it. And you only get the large folks working on it. For duplexes, City of Dexter has allowed duplexes in our single family for 5 years now. We haven't had a single person do it. Part of our challenge is that 75% of our single-family residential areas are in site condominiums. They have master deeds and bylaws that says single-family house, that's it. So unless this applies to all those areas, and when I do my work in Canton, it's probably 90% of the housing stock would not be able to duplex, even if we required people to put duplexes in. Additionally, the financing is really tricky. Folks who do single-family houses, they know how to do single-family houses. Banks who know how to do single-family houses, that's what they finance. Getting the mix, it's really tricky, so it's not just zoning. For the protest, my concern would be I don't know how to apply it as it's written now. If there are 4 tenants in an apartment, do all 4 of them count? Is it only 1? If there's a corporate entity that's a tenant, is it the CEO? Is it the stockholders? So Thank you guys for talking about zoning. Happy to answer any questions from the pointy end of the spear. I do have concerns with how these are written and that they wouldn't actually impact the affordability. Thank you.
All right, very quickly, Representative Farhat.
Very quickly. So I'm going to answer just quick questions. The population of the city of Dexter is how big?
5,500, but we are in a
5,500.
metropolitan statistical area.
5,500, okay. Developer and parking spots. I have to be very clear on this. I have sat with developers in Dearborn who have bought large pieces of property as Ford has begun to unload. Parking has been one of the biggest issues for them to overcome with the city. It is a massive issue. I think if you look at communities like Grand Rapids and Ann Arbor, who have done massive zoning reform, there's been a lot of positive generation around that and in local excitement for developers. My question, though, is very simple. I've seen presentations from MML, I've seen them from the locals, I've seen zoning on the PowerPoints. What are, Rep. Grant here is offering us 4 or 5 solutions that I think are great, to be candid. What are solutions in turn you would recommend, other than subsidizing communities to continuously trying to adopt better behavioral standards, right? Like, that's an expense right there. This right here would cost us as a state nothing. That $7 million we can spend on something else, on the roads, let's say.
So in the last 2 budget cycles, funding housing has been a priority for the state. So I think giving priority considerations to those places that have already made these changes would be huge, as well as looking at a slate of reforms, not you have to do A, B, and C. Here's a whole slate of reforms that could help, but different
Like what?
ones make sense in different areas. And so giving communities the ability, yes, you have to do 3 of them, but you get to pick the 3 and you get credit for the things you've already done. There are places across our state who already allow ADUs, accessory dwelling units by right, duplexes by right, have no parking standards. They're not seeing an increase in building as well as affordable units.
I think, again, for me, I was looking for some solutions here, but I think if we look at the city of Ann Arbor, there's a lot of groundbreaking.
Conversion of underutilized office spaces.
Yeah, I just want to be very clear. There's a tremendous price tag to that. We had a same problem, again, back in Dearborn, Ford's Blue Lagoon building, office spaces, to run HVAC and piping to those floors, extremely expensive, almost cheaper to build new. But again, that would, even if they did that, that wouldn't solve the requirements of parking that they'd have. That wouldn't solve the requirements of.
And I would think that this, the city of Dearborn is pretty savvy, especially
great.
under the
They're a
new
great mayor, of
administration, that if parking is their number 1 issue, they would make that reform. The pricing of lumber, framing lumber, is up over 17% last year. And last week was the first decrease in that price in several weeks.
Again, my point is on the package. If I could regulate the price of lumber, I'd do that. But I think, or we can do price gouging legislation on it. But I think, again, for the sake of this conversation, I'd look forward to hopefully some more solutions in tangible ways for us to do it. Converting office space is a great idea, of course, extremely expensive, doesn't solve the issues of petitioning, doesn't solve the zoning issues, doesn't solve the upfront surveys. I've had, again, developers that do multiple of the same surveys, either as a result of a crossover of administration in the city or as a result of, well, we did it then and let's just do it again to be safe. That's not fair. There's no accountability. And when we say fair, it's also not fair for young folks who want to live in this state, right?
I'm gonna have to stop it right now because we still have
Thank you,
a
Chair.
few more people who want to testify. So with that, thank you so much for your testimony. Next we have, I think, the Michigan Association of Townships also wanted to testify. Okay, Judy Allen looks like from the Michigan Association of Townships.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I apologize up front for my voice. It's coming and going, so it's that time of year. Again, I don't want to belabor and repeat a lot of that's already been said, but I will say that, MTA has been very appreciative of work that the legislature has done in the past on housing, including the funding that Jen mentioned for the zoning that's enabled so many of our communities, including a lot of our rural communities, to get that reform that they needed. We are opposing this package, and I will say 6095 through 6097. 6098 does not affect townships. But we think that, maybe with some changes to that bill, it could address a lot of the issues overall. But with the 6095, One of the concerns we have is, again, this is a broad brush for all communities in the state, and communities are not identical. I have townships that are in excess of 100,000 people. I have townships that maybe have 300 people. So as the gentleman previously said, if you have a family and you have, college kids or adult kids at home, and you have to be able to drive to get your groceries or for work or for education purposes, that is going to be a problem to have a 1.5 parking spot. So again, maybe in the more densely populated areas where there is public transit available, that might meet those needs, but across the board, and you have a rural area, it will not meet those needs. On 6096, I think, again, you've heard there are different types of needs for different types of projects, and it depends on where that development is also located. And for example, I had a long list of different types of studies that can be required, but again, it's going to depend on that project. So with that, we don't want to see a situation where we will have to basically have a full-time staff to create a document, a form that's going to list every possible study that might be needed, because not all of them are needed. If you're putting in a 1,200 square foot home or commercial building, that is not necessarily going to be the same that is if you have noise or light or traffic or environmental impact. And just a last point on 6096 is subsection 5. We just have some concerns with the striking of some language in there because it will eliminate other standards that aren't included in zoning from being subject to approval or denial. For example, you might have a complex. We have one right now in a township on the west side of the state. They're putting in a condominium project, but the property is contaminated. If everything's done and there's still contamination, that will be a problem. They couldn't deny that project based on this language from our view of it. And then 6097, again, this is just a concern about adjacent communities. I know Representative Roth mentioned, when there was discussion about Grand Traverse County, but areas that surround that. And if these change with a census, we could have communities then that have to change their zoning and have non-conforming use. So those are things that I think need to be considered when looking at that legislation. So with that, my time's up. Thank you so much for your time and your patience with my voice.
All right, thank you. You're all set. You're good. Thank you so much for your testimony today. Next, we are going. All right, we are getting close on time, but I want to make sure that I know some people traveled a little bit to get here. So I'm wondering if we can have some people come up at the same time, kind of get to the main points. So next on the list, we had Brad Ward from the Michigan Realtors. And why don't you come up with Marta Johnson from the Climate Cabinet? You guys can just go ahead and rip right through this.
Hello, my name is Brad Ward. I'm here on behalf of the Michigan Realtors. Our membership supports House Bills 6095 through 6098. The income required to buy a median price home is twice what it was in the year 2000. The current housing inventory across the state of Michigan is below 3.5 months. A stable market is 6 months of inventory. This package represents an essential step towards addressing Michigan's housing crisis by expanding availability of housing at all price points. Housing prices are hurting our workforce. Even if you're well off, paying twice what you would for a house is a strain on your finance. These bills address Michigan's housing challenges by cutting costs, delays, and barriers to development. They reduce construction costs by eliminating excessive parking requirements and streamline approvals for faster, predictable development. Enabling the creation of more duplexes, they also help increase the housing supply while preserving neighborhood character. Additionally, these reforms ensure fairness and zoning amendments, preventing small groups from obstructing projects that benefit the entire community. combating NIMBYism. Both red and blue states have taken similar steps to address their housing shortages. The bills before you are probably the lowest of the low-hanging fruit as far as zoning changes. At this point, every little bit helps. These changes will help ensure that our communities remain vibrant and accessible for families, workers, retirees alike. States have implemented similar reforms and have seen significant progress in addressing housing shortages and affordability. We have an opportunity to lead on this issue, and if housing is a priority, we should make it one. I urge this committee to support these bills. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer questions, and I will now turn it over to our friends over at the Climate Cabinet.
You got it. My name is Marta Johnson, and I serve as the state lead for Climate Cabinet in Michigan. At Climate Cabinet, we're focused on substantially bringing down greenhouse gas emissions at the local and state level while building a brighter, more equitable future for all. While others will speak more directly to the availability and affordability crisis, I want to shed a little light on how housing solutions that encourage more multifamily options are an important way to reduce pollution and build a brighter future for more of our communities across the state. Let's take a 2010 Oregon study as an example. When researchers assessed the impact of adding 3 multifamily units to a block, it showed potential to reduce pollution for the whole block by 20%. Comparing duplexes and other multiplexes to past and current sized homes, there can be up to 60% pollution savings. It makes sense. The materials, construction, and ongoing energy costs to heat, cool, and provide electricity to these homes is going to be lower for smaller spaces. I'll wrap up quickly because I know we're short on time here, but all of this reduced pollution will increase quality of life, and we urge you to support House Bill 6095, 6096, 6097, and 6098. Just like they say about planting trees, the best time to improve opportunities to build more types of housing was really 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Questions?
No questions. All right, and looks like the last set of people will have Joel Arnold from Communities First, and would you come up with Kirk Westfall from Abundant Housing, Michigan. And as fast as you can.
Absolutely, we'll be quick. Well, good morning, committee. Thank you for giving us some time to speak. My name is Joel Arnold. I'm with Communities First, Inc. We're a nonprofit community development group that does a lot of affordable housing development. And I know it's been mentioned today that over the last couple of years, this legislature has been very intentional about funding more housing, providing more financing supports. The challenge is most of the most affordable types of housing, including duplexes, are simply illegal to build in large parts of our state. And without the kinds of reforms that House Bill 6095 through 6098 provides, that's going to continue to be the case. So the funding side is key, but without these land use reforms, we're going to continue to see housing prices go up, the most affordable types of housing be illegal in our state, and people priced out of opportunities to live in the communities that they've grown up with. And I can tell you, as an organization that builds housing in the state of Michigan, and across communities, I can give you 4 or 5 examples of where parking minimums or density restrictions have eliminated housing units. So if there's anybody on this committee that ever wanted to see in real terms the manifestation of how the regulations that we see all over our state stop new housing from getting built and keep people either unhoused or in housing situations they don't want to be in, I'm more than happy to give that. And unfortunately, that's a real reality in our state that's making it so people can't afford to live in this place that we all love. So I strongly encourage this committee to support these 4 bills, and I appreciate your time this morning.
Good morning, Kirk Westfall. I'm here on behalf of Abundant Housing Michigan. We're a grassroots, all-volunteer organization with members across the state. Some of our member organizations include Flint Residents for Stronger Neighborhoods, Ann Arbor Housing for All, Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness, YIMBY Oakland County, Neighborhood Institute, and others. We also organize with partners like Strong Towns Grand Rapids to advocate for public policy. Our organization is driven simply by a desire to see more housing and more types of housing and more affordable choices for our friends and families to live in. My own personal background is in urban planning. In my civic life, I served on Ann Arbor City Council and Planning Commission in the aughts and 2010s. And during that time, we began to see the housing crisis emerge and get to a boiling point in our city and many areas of the state. And just as we know that the economic engines of our state are regional, so is the housing demand. Housing affordability the housing affordability problem simply doesn't respect political boundaries. For example, what became clear to me during my service on council was that our failure to get ahead of the housing supply crunch was having and continues to have a harmful ripple effect on rents and home prices for hundreds of thousands of people outside the city. They've had to either pay more for housing, get priced out further and further from where they want to be, accelerating suburban sprawl and auto dependence. Clearly, there are lots of city services that make sense to administer at the local level, but land use planning is challenging because of this growing mismatch between political and economic boundaries. That's why at Abundant Housing Michigan, we firmly believe that, like in many other states, at least some basic state-level protections are needed. In order to give all Michiganders a shot at housing affordability, we need to begin removing the housing supply barriers that exist across the state. With the bills before you, they won't solve the housing crisis, but they're an excellent step in the right direction, and I urge you to support them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you both so much for your testimony this morning. All right, here is what's going to happen now. One, we have some cards that have been turned in. I'm not going to read them. We're just gonna put them in the minutes. I know that there is somebody who wanted to testify virtually. We're not going to be able to get to you. What we're going to do now, we are going to go at ease. We are going to come back this afternoon after session, and we're going to vote out some of these bills. Actually, I might do. Find it. I guess I'll do the minutes afterwards. With that, the committee will go at ease at the call of the chair.